When I finish a grammar lesson, I tend to ask myself whether the students have come away with an understanding of the target structure. So in this lesson, it was the second conditional. Do they understand how it's used, when it's used, how it's formed? Are they pronouncing it as naturally as possible? And have they had some useful practice so that they're starting to produce it? And I think in this lesson they did come away with that. I think there were a couple of students who'd studied it before, so they were already familiar with it because they've been at the school for quite a long time. But I think the other students, it was new for them. I also asked myself about whether they're engaged in the lesson, because obviously, they need to be paying attention in order to retain any of the language that you're studying. And I think, although they were quite quiet, quieter than normal because they were being filmed, I think that's why, they were still engaged and participating. So I think that it was a useful lesson for them. Some of the techniques I was using in the class included concept-checking questions to check that they'd understood the meaning and use of the language. I used my fingers to highlight the form so that they were familiar with the forms and the contraction as well. I also drilled for pronunciation and used substitution drills so that the students were actually thinking about the form of the language and focusing on that before we then move to more personalised practice, going from control to freer practice at the end there as well. I think in terms of classroom management, I was monitoring. In the control practice areas, I was giving on-the-spot error correction. But in the final activity, I wanted them to develop their fluency a little bit more, so we did some delayed correction on the board. Thinking back about things that I might change, I think the second part was quite challenging for some of them, but for timing reasons I wanted to get onto the grammar, so I didn't focus too much. But perhaps with a longer lesson I would have played that again so that they could have really listened for those things that they needed to listen for. Other than that, I think the lesson mostly went as I expected, but they do need obviously a lot more practice. They need to develop that grammar much more. They need to be able to use it in more fluent spoken English. So they need to have consolidation, they need to have more opportunities to use it, and obviously more error correction as well, so that they can hopefully start to use it more fluently.